Imagine a land where the earth itself breathes with the rhythm of the monsoon, where a single river changes direction twice a year, turning a kingdom into an inland sea. Where stone giants rise from a canopy of emerald silk, and where the silence of the forest is not an absence of sound, but a choir of ancient memories. Where the sun gilds the tips of sandstone towers that have stood for a millennium. And in the humid heat of the afternoon, the scent of damp earth and jasmine hangs heavy in the air. This is Cambodia. Pressed against the Gulf of Thailand and cradled by the Mekong River, this is a landscape defined by the relentless negotiation between water and stone. From the jagged Angkor Mountains in the north to the sediment-rich deltas of the south, the map is a tapestry of Jurassic sandstones, volcanic basalt, and the soft, life-giving silt of the floodplains. Here, the story began long before the first chisel struck rock. It began with the rising of the Indochina terrain and the shifting of prehistoric seas that left behind the karst towers and the salt-stained marshes. You're watching Era Trails, the channel where we slow down, look closer, and explore the stories behind the world's most remarkable places. In this documentary, we are tracing a line through the heart of the Khmer homeland. We will follow a path that honors the Bunong, the Kui, and the Jarai, the guardians of the highland forests. Before we ever reach the gates of the stone cities, we will feel the spray of waterfalls hidden in the cardamoms, walk the sun-baked ridges of northern cliff tops, and listen to the pulse of the Great Lake. We aren't just visiting sites. We are tracing the spine of a nation that learned how to build a civilization on the edge of a flood. The journey begins where the land dissolves into the Gulf of Thailand. As you step off the red dust tracks of the mainland and toward the coast of Ream National Park, officially known as Preah Vihear Ream National Park, the air changes instantly. The dry inland heat is replaced by a thick, salt-heavy humidity that clings to the skin. There is a specific scent here, a mixture of decaying organic matter from the mangroves, the sharp brine of the sea, and the sweet fermented aroma of drying seagrass. It is the smell of a landscape that is constantly recycling itself. Geologically, this coastal fringe is a masterclass in sedimentation and gradual transformation. While much of Cambodia is defined by ancient sandstone, Ream is shaped by the more recent Quaternary deposits. Here, the mountains of the Cardamom Range finally lose their height, spilling weathered minerals into the basin to form vast alluvial plains and estuarine mud flats. The ground beneath your feet is a soft, dark silt, rich in nutrients and remarkably cool to the touch, even under the midday sun. It is a transitional geology, where the hard rock of the continent meets the shifting liquid boundaries of the shelf. Looking out from the shoreline, the first impression is one of deep, layered greens. To the left, the Preah Sap River winds like a silver ribbon through the primary forest, its brackish waters moving with a slow, heavy pulse. The sound is dominated by the rhythmic metallic clicking of thousands of snapping shrimp beneath the water's surface and the distant, hollow thud of a long-tail boat's engine. This is not the manicured coastline of a resort. It is a raw, working wilderness. Two specific locations define the character of this opening stop. The first is the Preah Sap Estuary, a labyrinth of walking trees or rhizophora mangroves. Their arched roots create a subterranean cathedral of wood and shadows, trapping silt and protecting the inland from the erosive power of the monsoon swells. Navigating through these narrow channels, the temperature drops significantly as the canopy closes over the boat, creating a pocket of still, tea-colored water. The second location is Koh Ker, or New Island, situated just a few hundred meters off the coast. Unlike the mainland's muddy reaches, the western flank of this island features beaches of crushed shells and golden quartz sand. Walking along the shoreline of Koh Ker, the sound of the water shifting the shells is like 1,000 tiny glass bells ringing in unison. It is a place of profound solitude, where the only tracks in the sand belong to the birds and the wind. Here, the geological story of the park reaches its conclusion, as the terrestrial sediments are finally claimed by the tides and turned into the floor of the Gulf. The water here is shallow and pale turquoise, reflecting a sky that often feels immense and heavy with the promise of rain. In the distance, the silhouette of the Elephant Mountains provides a jagged blue backdrop, reminding you that while the coast is soft and shifting, the hard stone spine of the country is never far away. As the tide begins to retreat, exposing miles of glistening mud flats, the true scale of this amphibious world becomes clear. A landscape that is neither fully land nor fully sea, but a delicate, breathing equilibrium between the two. Long before the arrival of modern conservationists or the French colonial administration, the waters of Ream were the lifeblood of the Khmer people, who viewed the intersection of the forest and the sea as a sacred threshold. To the local fishing communities, the mangroves are not merely a botanical feature, but a nursery for the soul of the coast. There is a deep-seated belief in the spirits of the water, the Nik Ta, who reside in the ancient gnarled trees and the deep pools of the Preah Sap. On a quiet morning, you might see a small, colorful wooden spirit house tucked into the roots of a bruguiera tree, adorned with faded incense sticks and fresh blossoms, a silent plea for safe passage and a bountiful catch. The history here is one of resilience and subsistence. For centuries, the people of the coast have practiced a form of slow harvest, gathering mud crabs and sea snails by hand in the intertidal zones. This activity is dictated entirely by the moon and the pull of the tide. When the water retreats, the silence of the park is broken by the squelch of feet in the heavy mud and the rhythmic tink-tink of small metal tools against shells. To participate in this, even as an observer, is to understand the patience required to live in harmony with a landscape that refuses to be hurried. The mud is cool and thick, smelling of sulfur and life, a stark contrast to the shimmering heat haze that dances over the open water of the Gulf. In the mid-20th century, the area saw a different kind of history. Ream was established as a national park in 1993 by royal decree, one of the first in the country to receive such protection following years of civil unrest. However, the scars of the past are still whispered in the landscape. Near the Ream naval base, the atmosphere shifts. The wildness is tempered by the presence of human geometry. Yet, even here, nature is reclaiming the edges. The ruins of old wooden piers, weathered by salt and sun, until they resemble the gray skeletons of whales, stand as reminders of the fleeting nature of human infrastructure in the face of the relentless ocean. As we prepare to depart from this coastal sanctuary, the transition is marked by a final trek through the Melaleuca forests that fringe the wetlands. The trees, with their papery, peeling white bark, create a ghostly corridor that leads back toward the interior. The sound of the surf at Koh Tame fades, replaced by the dry rustle of leaves and the high-pitched hum of cicadas. The temperature begins to rise again as we move away from the cooling influence of the sea breezes. Our path now turns inland and upward. We leave behind the soft, shifting silts of the coast for the hard, ancient heart of the kingdom. The horizon to the west is dominated by the dark, brooding silhouettes of the Cardamom Mountains, our next destination. We are moving from the realm of water and sediment to the realm of stone and mist, where the peaks reach into the clouds and the secrets of the deep past are locked in Jurassic rock. The transition is profound, from the horizontal expanse of the mangroves to the vertical defiance of the high ridges. To enter the Cardamom Mountains, or Kravan, is to step into a vertical fortress of stone that has remained largely impenetrable for millions of years. This is not the soft, sediment-heavy world of the coast. This is a massive uplift of Jurassic and Cretaceous sandstone, a remnant of the Indocinian orogeny. As you ascend the foothills toward Phnom Samkos, the second highest peak in the country, the temperature drops sharply. The humid air of the lowlands is wrung out against the slopes, creating a permanent mist that smells of wet lichen and cold, ancient minerals. The geological foundation here is a rugged basement of metamorphic rock, capped by thick layers of continental sandstone. Over eons, the intense tropical rainfall, among the highest in Southeast Asia, has carved deep, jagged gorges and high plateaus. The ground is often a vibrant, acidic red, stained by iron oxides and littered with quartz pebbles that catch the filtered sunlight. Unlike the flat floodplains of the interior, the topography here is chaotic. Huge boulders, some the size of village houses, lie scattered in the riverbeds of the Stung Metuk, smoothed into surreal fluid shapes by the relentless force of the water. Looking across the ridgelines, the landscape appears as a series of receding blue waves. The scale is humbling. Beneath the soil lies a complex network of subterranean aquifers and hidden caves. carved by the slow dissolution of the underlying rock. This massif acts as a giant sponge, capturing the monsoon rains and feeding the veins of the entire kingdom. The sound of the mountains is the sound of water in motion. The distant roar of the Osom Rapids and the constant high-altitude drip of condensation falling from the forest canopy. It is a landscape of profound stability, a geological anchor that has protected this interior wilderness from the rising and falling of the seas for over 150 million years. The Cardamom Mountains represent a biological fortress, a place where the density of life is so profound, it feels as though the forest itself is inhaling. Because of the steep, inaccessible terrain and the long isolation of the Phnom Samkos Massif, evolution here has taken its own distinct path. The air is thick with the scent of wild cardamom, the Elitaria cardamomum, which gives the range its colonial name. Its green, waxy pods release a sharp, resinous spice that cuts through the heavy smell of damp earth. In the mid-canopy, the soundscape is dominated by the haunting, melodic call of the pileated gibbon. Their vocalizations are not merely noise, they are complex, haunting duets that echo off the sandstone cliffs in the early morning light. These primates, with their striking white masks and agile limbs, are the ghost guardians of the high branches. They share this vertical world with the great hornbill, whose massive wings create a rhythmic whoosh-whoosh sound, like a slow-moving steam engine as they glide between the fruiting ficus trees. Lower down, in the shadowed damp of the forest floor, the flora is equally specialized. The Nepenthes holdeni, a species of pitcher plant found only in these mountains, clings to the nutrient-poor sandstone ridges. Its deep, crimson-veined traps are filled with digestive enzymes, a carnivorous adaptation to the acidic soil. You might also encounter the Cambodian sun bear, the smallest of its kind, whose presence is often marked by deep claw scars on the bark of the Dipterocarpus trees. The ecology here is a delicate web of interdependence. The trees provide the structure, the monsoons provide the energy, and the fauna ensures the cycle of regeneration continues in a landscape where every inch of space is a contest for light. The human history of the Cardamoms is not written in grand stone monuments, but in the silence of the high ridges and the oral traditions of the Chorng and Samre peoples. Long before the rise of the Khmer Empire, these indigenous groups moved through these peaks, viewing the mountains as the home of powerful ancestral spirits. To the Chorng, the peaks are not resources to be exploited, but living entities that require respect and ritual. In the hidden crevices of the Phnom Samkos Wildlife Sanctuary, researchers have discovered a haunting legacy of deep time. The burial jars of the Cardamoms, resting on narrow rock ledges overlooking dizzying drops, these ceramic jars, some dating back to the 15th century, contain the remains of a highland culture that remains largely a mystery. The placement of these jars suggests a belief in a vertical transition to the afterlife. The higher the resting place, the closer the spirit remains to the mist. The air in these cliffside alcoves is still and dry, smelling faintly of dust and ancient clay. The more recent history is darker. For decades, these mountains were a final stronghold for the Khmer Rouge, whose presence turned this paradise into a forbidden zone. The isolation that protected the gibbons also hid the scars of conflict. It is only in the last 20 years that the mountains have truly opened again. Walking the old trails today, you might still see the rusted remains of a supply cart or a forgotten bunker, now being slowly dismantled by the persistent roots of the forest. This layers a sense of melancholy over the landscape. A reminder that while the geology is eternal, human presence here has often been defined by struggle and retreat. In the Cardamoms, architecture is not defined by stone monuments, but by the ingenious adaptation of the Chorng and Samre people to a vertical, high rainfall environment. The traditional highland dwelling is a masterwork of forest engineering, built entirely from local bambusa and dipterocarp hardwoods. These structures are raised high on thick stilts to escape the dampness of the forest floor and the curiosity of nocturnal wildlife. The roofs are steeply pitched and thatched with the broad, waxy leaves of the Phrynium plant, which create a rhythmic, drumming sound during the afternoon downpours, an acoustic signature of life in the clouds. Inside these homes, the atmosphere is dictated by the central hearth. The smell of wood smoke is constant, serving a dual purpose. It cures the meat hanging from the rafters and acts as a natural repellent against the relentless insects of the monsoon. Cultural life here is deeply tied to the spirit of the mountain. Rituals often involve the playing of the chape dang veng, a long-necked lute, whose strings vibrate with a dry, twanging resonance that seems to mimic the calls of the forest birds. Music is not a performance here. It is a conversation with the landscape, performed to ensure the protection of the Nikta spirits who reside in the towering sandstone outcrops. Community life centers around the harvest of forest products, particularly the wild resins and cardamom that gave these mountains their name. There is a specific destination within this region known as the Osom community, where the culture of the Chorng is being preserved through ancestral land titles. Here, you can witness the traditional weaving of rattan baskets, where the fingers of the elders move with a practiced, blurring speed. The texture of the finished baskets is remarkably smooth, a testament to the thousands of hours spent stripping and curing the vine. Another unique location is the Spirit Forest of Chifat, a protected grove where no tree may be cut, and where the air feels noticeably cooler and heavier, as if the collective memory of the mountain is concentrated in a single stand of ancient timber. The legacy of the Cardamom Mountains is currently being written in the tension between preservation and progress. For centuries, the isolation of Phnom Samkos was its greatest shield, but today, that shield is thinning. The primary challenge is the encroachment of illegal logging and the fragmentation of the habitat. However, a new legacy is emerging through community-based ecotourism. The very people who once relied on the extraction of forest resources are now the primary guardians of the pileated gibbon and the Malayan sun bear. This shift represents a profound transition in the human relationship with the deep time of the mountains, from exploitation to stewardship. Conservation efforts are now focused on creating wildlife corridors that reconnect the fragmented patches of forest, allowing the megafauna to move freely from the high ridges down to the coastal plains of Ream. As you stand on a high ridge overlooking the Areng Valley, the scale of the task is visible. You can see the dark, unbroken green of the primary forest meeting the lighter, patchy scars of newer settlements. The air is clear, the silence is vast, and the sense of responsibility is palpable. As we prepare to descend from these misty heights, the transition is sharp. We are leaving the rugged Jurassic fortress behind and moving toward the flat, alluvial heart of the country. The temperature begins to climb as we drop in elevation, and the scent of the wild cardamom fades, replaced by the drier, dustier smell of the lowland plains. Our next stop takes us to the ancient limestone karsts of Battambang, where the geology shifts from the massive sandstone of the mountains to the porous, cave-riddled towers of Phnom Sap. We are moving from the realm of the forest spirits to the realm of stone memories. Leaving the dense, vertical humidity of the cardamoms, the landscape flattens into the vast, sun-baked plains of northwestern Cambodia. As we approach Battambang, the horizon is interrupted by sudden, dramatic limestone karsts that erupt from the rice paddies like the spines of a buried dragon. The most significant of these is Phnom Sap. The air here is different. It loses the resinous scent of the high forest and takes on the dry, toasted aroma of sun-dried rice stalks and the faint alkaline tang of pulverized stone. Geologically, Phnom Sap is an island of Permian limestone, a remnant of an ancient marine environment that existed over 250 million years ago. While the rest of the region was being buried under river silt, these calcium carbonate massifs remained, weathered by tropical rains, into a honeycomb of secondary porosity. The rock is sharp, gray, and pitted, characterized by karst towers and deep solution hollows. Walking near the base of the mountain, the temperature fluctuates. Waves of heat radiate from the sun-warmed stone, but as you approach the mouths of the many caverns, a sudden, cool draft emerges from the earth, smelling of damp mineral and shadows. The first impression of Phnom Sap is one of eerie, vertical beauty. Two locations define the geological experience here. The first is the Bat Caves at the mountain's base. Every evening at dusk, the silence of the plains is broken by a low, rushing sound, like a distant waterfall or a silk sheet being torn. This is the sound of millions of wrinkle-lipped bats, Cherophon plicatus, emerging in a synchronized serpentine ribbon that stretches across the sky for miles. The sheer kinetic energy of the exodus creates a downward draft that carries the pungent, musky scent of guano, a sensory reminder of the massive biological engine living within the limestone. The history of Phnom Sap is a stark reminder of the duality of the Cambodian landscape, a place of celestial beauty that has served as a backdrop for profound human tragedy. Long before the 20th century, these limestone heights were a center of Buddhist pilgrimage. Local legends speak of the mountain as the hull of a ship, the Zampo, that was cursed and turned to stone. For generations, the Khmer have climbed these jagged stairs to seek merit, their chants mingling with the mountain breeze. However, the late 1970s transformed these sacred natural voids into the killing caves. During the Khmer Rouge regime, the deep solution shafts of the limestone were used as execution sites. Today, the atmosphere at the cave's mouth is heavy and contemplative. The air is remarkably still, smelling of incense and old stone, as a golden, reclining Buddha now rests at the base of the shaft. Looking upward toward the patch of sky where victims were once cast down, This is a place where the deep time of the limestone meets the immediate, painful memory of the modern era. The silence here is different from the silence of the Cardamoms. It is a silence of reconciliation. Culturally, Battambang is defined by its artistic resilience. In the shadow of the mountain, the local communities have maintained the tradition of Lakhon Kol, masked dance, and the town has become the country's cultural heartbeat. A key activity for any visitor is experiencing the bamboo train, or nori. These are improvised rail vehicles made of a wooden frame, bamboo decking, and a small petrol engine, running on the warped, colonial-era tracks left by the French. Riding the nori through the flatlands toward Phnom Sompo, you feel every vibration of the iron rails, the wind carrying the scent of drying lotus flowers and wood smoke. It is a sensory bridge between the industrial past and the rural present. As we depart Battambang, the karst towers begin to shrink in the rearview mirror, eventually dissolving back into the haze of the horizon. The hard, gray limestone is replaced by a landscape that is increasingly dominated by the presence of water. We are moving toward the center of the kingdom's hydraulic heart. The dust of the plains is giving way to the humidity of the great floodplains. Our next stop is a world that defies the very definition of land. We are heading toward the Tonlé Sap, a geological anomaly where the earth disappears for half the year, and where civilization has learned to float, drift, and pulse with the rhythm of the Mekong's backflow. We leave the stone sentinels of Phnom Sompo behind and prepare to enter the liquid kingdom. To understand the Tonlé Sap, one must stop thinking of it as a lake and begin viewing it as a massive liquid lung. This is the largest freshwater lake in Southeast Asia, but its geological story is defined by a phenomenon found nowhere else on Earth, the flood pulse. Geologically, the lake sits within the Tonlé Sap Basin, a vast, low-lying depression formed by the sagging of the Earth's crust, a process known as subsidence, linked to the same tectonic forces that raise the Himalayas. The basin is filled with thick layers of quaternary lacustrine sediments, a fine gray-blue clay that has been settling here for thousands of years. The defining characteristic of this landscape is its elasticity. During the dry season, the lake is a shallow pool, barely more than a meter deep in many places, covering about 2,500 square kilometers. However, when the monsoon rains arrive, the Mekong River swells with such ferocity that it forces its tributary, the Tonlé Sap River, to flow backward. This reverse flow engorges the basin, expanding the lake to over 16,000 square kilometers and raising the water level by up to 10 meters. The temperature of the water is warm, often matching the ambient air, and it carries a heavy load of suspended silt that gives it a characteristic opaque café au lait color. The sound of the landscape at this scale is a low, constant thrum, the vibration of water against wood, the splash of jumping fish, and the rustle of the inundated forest. Two specific locations highlight the geological and hydrological drama. The first is the Chinook True entrance, where the transition from river to open sea is most apparent. Here, the horizon simply vanishes into a haze of heat and moisture. The second is the inundated forest of the Preah Vihear biosphere. For half the year, These trees are submerged up to their mid-canopy. In the dry season, they stand like skeletal giants on parched, cracked mud. The smell here is complex, a mix of drying algae, fresh rain, and the metallic tang of the mineral-rich silt that is the lifeblood of the entire Khmer food chain. As the water levels rise, the Tonlé Sap transforms into a sunken jungle. The ecology here is defined by the Mekong giant catfish, one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, which can grow to the size of a small boat. These ancient giants migrate from the deep pools of the northern rivers to spawn in the nutrient-rich floodplains of the lake. The water is thick with life. It is estimated that this single basin produces more fish than all the rivers and lakes of North America combined. The sound of the lake's ecology is a constant, wet percussion, the bloop of rising air bubbles, the splash of predatory snakeheads, and the rhythmic slapping of waves against the tangled roots of the flooded forest. The flora is dominated by the Barringtonia acutangula, a water-tolerant tree known locally as Ream. During the flood, only the topmost branches remain visible, draped in long, weeping clusters of red flowers that smell faintly of honey and damp moss. These trees provide the essential scaffolding for the Prek tollbird sanctuary, a location that serves as the last remaining breeding ground in Southeast Asia for the spot-billed pelican and the prehistoric-looking greater adjutant stork. Standing on a viewing platform above the canopy, the air is filled with the cacophony of thousands of nesting birds, a chaotic mix of guttural croaks and the clattering of bills, while the heat of the afternoon sun draws a heavy, musky scent from the guano-covered branches. The history of the Tonlé Sap is a story of human adaptation to a landscape that refuses to stay still. For the Khmer civilization, the lake was the Great Mother, providing the protein and the irrigation water that fueled the rise of the Angkorian Empire. Ancient bas-reliefs on the walls of the Bayon Temple depict this relationship in vivid detail. Scenes of fishermen casting nets from longboats, surrounded by crocodiles and turtles. This is deep time lived in the present. The techniques seen in those 12th century carvings, the wicker traps and the specific rowing styles, are identical to those you see on the lake today. Indigenous history here is intertwined with the water. Before the modern borders were solidified, various ethnic groups, including the Cham and ethnic Vietnamese communities, moved through these waterways. They developed a culture of mobility, viewing the lake not as a barrier, but as a highway. The history of the lake is also one of seasonal migration. For centuries, families have moved their entire households multiple times a year, following the retreating shoreline. This constant motion has created a cultural psyche of resilience and impermanence. The air in the older reaches of the lake smells of wood smoke and fermented fish paste, Preah Vihear, a scent that has likely defined the human presence here for over 1,000 years. Life on the Tonlé Sap is a triumph of buoyancy over gravity. The architecture here is entirely amphibious, designed to accommodate a world where the ground is a seasonal visitor. In villages like Kampong Pluk or Kampong Klayang, the structures fall into two distinct categories: stilted houses and floating houses. The stilted houses are marvels of timber engineering, perched on slender, resilient Hardwickia binata columns that can reach up to 12 meters in height. During the dry season, these houses tower over the dusty lakebed, accessible only by long wooden ladders. In the flood, the water laps at the floorboards, and the village transforms into a Venice of the East, where the primary mode of transport shifts from foot to paddle. The floating houses, however, are even more specialized. Built on rafts of bamboo or large PVC canisters, these dwellings are moored to trees in the flooded forest. They are not static. As the shoreline retreats or advances, the entire village unmoors and migrates, towed by small motorboats to deeper water. The sound of these villages is a constant watery percussion, the slap of waves against the bamboo hulls, the high-pitched hum of outboard long-tail motors, and the laughter of children who learn to swim before they learn to walk. The air is heavy with the scent of drying fish and the charcoal smoke from kitchen fires that seem to hover miraculously just above the waterline. Culturally, the lake is the heart of the Bon Om Tuk, or the Water Festival. This celebration marks the reversal of the Tonlé Sap River's flow, a moment of profound geological and spiritual significance. It is a time of boat races and illuminated floats, but at its core, it is a ritual of gratitude to the water spirits for the sediment and the harvest. A unique destination within this stop is the Gecko Center, an environmental hub in the floating village of Chong Nias. Here, the intersection of culture and conservation is visible, as local children are taught to identify the very species, like the Siamese crocodile, that their ancestors both feared and worshipped. Another unique location is the Floating Pagoda, a shimmering sanctuary of gold and red leaf that rises and falls with the tide, proving that even the divine must adapt to the pulse of the lake. The legacy of the Tonlé Sap is one of precarious balance. For 1,000 years, the flood pulse was a reliable clock, but today, that clock is being disrupted. Upstream dams on the Mekong and the changing patterns of the monsoon are altering the volume and timing of the great backflow. The transition we are witnessing is a move from a landscape of abundance to one of careful management. The sediment that once moved freely is being trapped, and the great liquid lung is breathing more shallowly. The people of the lake are the first to feel this change. They are the barometers of the kingdom's environmental health. Yet, there is a legacy of resilience. The transition to community-managed fisheries and protected bird sanctuaries like Prek Tol shows a path forward. The people of the lake are no longer just harvesters. They are becoming the monitors of the water quality and the guardians of the flooded forest. As you look out over the vast expanse of the lake at sunset, the water reflects a sky of bruised purples and burnt oranges. The scale of the lake makes you feel small, a temporary visitor to a system that has sustained empires. As we leave the floating world of the Tonlé Sap, we head toward the north, following the same path the water took to nourish the ancient capital. The humidity of the lake stays with us, but the horizon begins to change. The open water is replaced by the dark, towering silhouettes of the stone forest. We are moving from the kingdom of water to the kingdom of the gods. Our next stop is the heart of the Khmer soul, where the stone foundations were laid by the silt of this very lake. We are heading to Angkor. To enter the Angkor Archaeological Park is to witness a profound dialogue between human ambition and the physical constraints of the earth. While the world sees soaring towers, the story begins beneath the topsoil. This 400 square kilometer site sits upon a vast, low-lying alluvial plain, a geological transition zone between the Kulen Mountains to the north and the Tonlé Sap Basin to the south. The ground here is a complex layering of quaternary sands and clays, deposits left by ancient river systems that once meandered across this shelf. The primary geological protagonist of Angkor, however, is not the sand, but laterite, formed by the intense chemical weathering of rocks in hot, wet tropical conditions. This iron and aluminum-rich clay hardens into a porous, brick-like rock when exposed to air. It is the hidden skeleton of every major temple. Beneath the refined sandstone surfaces lies this rugged, blood-red stone, providing the structural integrity needed to support millions of tons of weight on a soft, sandy foundation. Walking through the corridors of Preah Vihear, the temperature drops as the thick laterite walls insulate the interior from the baking sun, smelling of damp iron and ancient dust. The landscape is also defined by its hydraulic topography. The Khmer engineers recognized that the sandy soil was prone to liquefaction, shifting and collapsing when saturated or overly dry. To stabilize the stone giants, they surrounded them with massive moats. These are not merely defensive features, they are sophisticated pressure valves. By keeping the groundwater table at a constant level year-round, the moats prevent the sand beneath the temples from expanding or contracting, effectively locking the foundations in place. The sound of this landscape is the soft lap of water against ancient masonry and the heavy, humid silence of a forest that has spent centuries reclaiming stone. Two locations illustrate this geological mastery. The first is the West Baray, a colossal man-made reservoir 8 kilometers long. It is a working geological feature, a vast lens of water that recharges the local aquifer. The second is the Victory Way leading to Angkor Thom, where the transition from the natural forest floor to the precision of the sandstone causeway is most jarring. Here, the ground feels unnaturally level, a testament to the thousands of tons of earth moved by hand to create a celestial city on a swamp. The Angkor region is a strange hybrid landscape where the distinction between the botanical and the architectural has dissolved. Over centuries, the jungle has not merely surrounded the temples, it has integrated with them. The air here is thick with the scent of crushed green leaves and the slightly sweet, fermented aroma of fallen fruit from the wild mango. In the heat of the afternoon, the humidity is so high that you can smell the moisture rising from the moss-covered stones, a scent that is earthy, cooling, and ancient. The dominant tree of the park is the Tetrameles nudiflora, commonly known as the spung or thitpok. These are the giants that strangle the temples of Ta Prohm. Their roots move like slow-moving lava, flowing over sandstone lintels and prying apart laterite blocks. The roots are surprisingly smooth to the touch, feeling more like weathered bone than wood. High above, the canopy is occupied by the great slaty woodpecker, the world's largest woodpecker, whose rhythmic, echoing thwack-thwack against the dipterocarpus trees sounds like a distant mason's hammer. The fauna of Angkor is largely nocturnal, but the presence of the long-tailed macaque is constant. Their high-pitched chatter and the rustle of their movements through the leaves provide a frantic soundtrack to the stillness of the ruins. In the deep moats, the ecology is dominated by the sacred lotus. The sound of the wind moving through a field of lotus leaves is a dry, whispering hiss, a sharp contrast to the heavy, wet silence of the inner sanctuaries. The flowers, which open with the sunrise, release a delicate fragrance that is often the first thing you smell as you cross the causeways at dawn. History in Angkor is measured not in years, but in the slow shift of stones. This was the seat of the Khmer Empire from the 9th to the 15th centuries, a civilization that viewed its capital as a terrestrial reflection of the divine cosmos. The deep time here is recorded in the sandstone itself, which was quarried from the Kulen Mountains and floated down canals. To touch the walls of Angkor Wat is to touch the work of generations. The stone feels remarkably fine-grained, still holding the sharpness of carvings made 800 years ago. The indigenous history of the region is often overshadowed by the grand monuments, but it is the foundation upon which the empire was built. The Khmer people's transition from a collection of smaller chiefdoms to a centralized empire was driven by their mastery of the environment. The history of Angkor is a history of labor, the movement of millions of cubic meters of earth to create the berets. The atmosphere in the less visited temples, like Bang Mealea, is one of profound stillness, where the smell of damp earth and the sight of collapsed galleries remind you that the empire's peak was a fleeting moment in a much longer geological struggle. The architecture of Angkor is a stone prayer rendered in 3 dimensions. It is the physical manifestation of the Hindu-Buddhist cosmology, where every temple is a miniature universe. The central sanctuary represents Mount Meru, the home of the gods, while the surrounding walls and moats represent the mountain ranges and cosmic oceans. To achieve this, the Khmer developed a specific architectural language based on the corbel arch, a technique where layers of stone are stepped inward until they meet at the top. This creates the iconic soaring lotus bud towers that define the skyline, though it limits the width of the interior corridors, creating a sense of narrow, rhythmic compression as you walk through the galleries. The culture of the park is etched into the very skin of the temples. The bas-reliefs are not merely decorative, they are a visual library of Khmer life. In the Bayon, the 12th century carvings depict the mundane alongside the divine. A woman selling fish in a market, a cockfight, and the birth of a child. This cultural continuity is mirrored in the living traditions of the park. Today, the Apsara dance, a classical Khmer performance characterized by intricate, slow-motion hand gestures, is still performed in the shadow of the ruins. The dancers, dressed in silk and gold, mimic the celestial nymphs carved into the sandstone walls, their movements fluid and controlled, smelling of jasmine and heavy perfume. 2 specific locations offer a deeper look into this cultural landscape. The first is Preah Khan, a temple that functioned as a massive university and city. Here, the architecture is designed as a series of concentric rectangles, creating a hall of mirrors effect with its endless succession of stone doorways. The second is the Terrace of the Leper King, a multi-layered sandstone platform featuring deeply carved, haunting figures of underworld deities. The air in these narrow trenches is noticeably cooler, and the sound of the wind whistling through the crevices creates a low, ghostly moan that feels like the breath of the stone itself. The legacy of Angkor is one of endurance and reclamation. For centuries, the West believed these cities were lost, but to the local Khmer, they were always sacred sites of pilgrimage. The transition the park is currently undergoing is a shift from ruin to living heritage. Through the work of the Apsara National Authority, the park is being managed not as a museum, but as a dynamic landscape where over 100,000 people still live and farm. This living aspect is what separates Angkor from other archaeological sites. The sound of a monk's bell or the smoke from a village cook fire is as much a part of the legacy as the stone towers. However, the legacy faces modern challenges. The massive influx of tourism and the changing groundwater levels pose a constant threat to the structural integrity of the laterite foundations. The transition forward involves low-impact preservation, using traditional materials like lime mortar and hand-carved sandstone to repair the damage of time. It is a slow, meditative process that mirrors the original construction of the city. As we leave the grand gates of Angkor Thom, the transition is one of elevation. We are following the path of the ancient stonecutters back to the source of the water and the rock. We move away from the civilized symmetry of the plain and begin the climb toward the sacred plateau. Our next stop is the Mountain of Indra, the birthplace of the empire, where the water is carved with 1,000 symbols and the air is thin and pure. We are heading to Phnom Kulen. To reach Phnom Kulen, one must leave the alluvial plains of Angkor and ascend a steep, jungle-clad escarpment. As the vehicle climbs the winding red dirt road, the air undergoes a dramatic transformation. The heavy, stagnant heat of the lowlands begins to thin, replaced by a breeze that is noticeably cooler and carries the sharp, clean scent of crushed ferns and wet sandstone. Phnom Kulen, which translates to Mountain of the Lychees, is not merely a hill. It is a vast sandstone plateau that rises abruptly from the flatlands, reaching an elevation of nearly 500 meters. Geologically, this is the northern edge of the Korat Plateau system. It is composed of massive layers of Mesozoic sandstone, primarily from the Pu Kradung Formation. This rock is the mother stone of the Khmer Empire. Every block used to build Angkor Wat was birthed from these heights. The plateau acts as a massive elevated aquifer. The porous sandstone absorbs the torrential monsoon rains, filtering the water through its ancient layers before releasing it into the rivers that feed the plains below. The ground is a pale, sandy soil, often littered with iron-rich pebbles that crunch underfoot with a dry, metallic sound. The first impression of the plateau is one of sacred seclusion. Unlike the grand, open vistas of the coastal parks, Phnom Kulen feels like a hidden world. The light here is filtered through a dense canopy of Hopea odorata trees, creating a dappled emerald glow. The soundscape is dominated by the constant, rushing roar of the Kulen waterfall, a two-tiered cascade that spills over a hard rock lip. The spray from the falls creates a localized microclimate where the temperature is always 5 degrees cooler than the surrounding forest, and the air smells of moss and pulverized water. Two specific locations define this geological anchor. The first is Kabal Spean, the Bridge of the Head. Here, The Stung Kabal Speen River flows over a bed of solid sandstone that has been meticulously carved with thousands of lingas, phallic symbols of the god Shiva. The water, as it rushes over these ancient carvings, is believed to be consecrated, turning the river itself into a liquid ritual. The second location is Preah Vihear, where a massive reclining Buddha has been carved directly into a colossal sandstone boulder that remains rooted in the earth. The transition from the natural, weathered surface of the boulder to the smooth, gilded features of the deity is a sensory bridge between the raw geology of the mountain and the spiritual aspirations of the people. The history of Phnom Kulen is the history of a beginning. In the year 802 AD, on this very plateau, King Jayavarman II declared himself a Chakravartin, a universal monarch, and proclaimed independence from Java. This was the birth of the Khmer Empire. To the Khmer people, this is not just a mountain. It is Mount Mahendra, the terrestrial equivalent of the home of the gods. The history here is layered like the sandstone itself, from the 9th century brick temples hidden in the overgrowth to the modern saffron-robed monks who maintain the mountain's spiritual pulse. Culturally, the mountain is defined by the water of life. A key activity here involves the ritual of the 1,000 lingas. Pilgrims descend to the riverbank, where the water is shallow and clear, to touch the submerged carvings. The sound of the water rushing over the stone is a constant, melodic backdrop to the quiet prayers of those seeking health and fertility. The smell of the river is distinct, fresh, mineral, and devoid of the silty heaviness of the lowlands. It is the scent of a source. A unique location is the Sra Damrai, or Elephant Pond. Deep within the forest, reachable only by narrow red dust trails, sits a colossal sandstone sculpture of an elephant, accompanied by lions and cows, all carved from a single, massive outcropping. Standing in the presence of these stone beasts, surrounded by the absolute silence of the high forest, you feel the weight of the 9th century. The air here is still, smelling of dry leaves and the metallic tang of the moss-covered rock. As we prepare to depart Phnom Kulen, we follow the path of the water down the southern slope. We leave behind the cool, sanctified mists of the birthplace and head toward a different kind of power. The transition is one of scale and isolation. We are moving northeast, away from the familiar tourist corridors of Angkor, into the dry, scrub-tangled plains where another capital once stood in defiance of tradition. Our next stop is the massive, lonely pyramid of the forest, the city of the usurper. We are heading to Koh Ker. To reach Koh Ker, or Chok Gargyar, we travel approximately 120 kilometers northeast of Angkor, entering a landscape that feels increasingly desolate and forgotten. The transition is marked by a shift in the Earth's color. The pale sands of the Kulen foothills give way to a deeper, more oxidized, ferruginous soil. This is the Koh Ker Plateau, a relatively flat but elevated plain characterized by its underlying Mesozoic sandstone and a high density of iron-rich laterite. Unlike the moist, river-fed basins of the south, this is a dry forest environment where the water table sits deep beneath the rock, forcing the vegetation to struggle for every drop. Geologically, the area is defined by its isolation from the major river systems. The bedrock here is part of the Cretaceous continental deposits, which provided a coarser, more robust grade of sandstone than that found in the southern quarries. The landscape is a mosaic of dipterocarp scrub and dense pockets of evergreen forest. Walking toward the central sanctuary, the ground feels hard and unyielding. The heat of the afternoon sun is absorbed by the dark laterite blocks and then radiated back, creating a shimmering haze that smells of sun-baked stone and dry, resinous timber. The most striking geological feature of this destination is its massive vertical presence in an otherwise horizontal world. Two specific locations define the site. The first is Prasat Thom, dominated by the Prang, a seven-tiered sandstone pyramid that rises 36 meters into the sky. Its sheer, linear geometry is a radical departure from the rounded organic shapes of earlier Khmer architecture. The second is the Rahal Barai, a massive 1.2-kilometer-long reservoir hand-carved directly into the sandstone and laterite bed. Unlike the earth embankment reservoirs of Angkor, the Rahal is a rock-cut basin designed to catch and hold the precious monsoon runoff in a region where the earth is otherwise a sieve. The sound here is one of profound, heavy stillness, a silence so deep that the rustle of a single lizard across the hot stone sounds like a sharp crack. The environment of Koh Ker is a study in heat and adaptation. Unlike the lush, humid corridors of Angkor, this plateau is dominated by the Indochina dry central forest. The air here is thin and carries the scent of parched timber and the sharp medicinal aroma of the Dipterocarpus alatus, or resin tree. These giants, with their straight, pale trunks and helicopter-like seeds, dominate the skyline. In the dry season, the forest floor is a carpet of crisp, copper-colored leaves that crunch with a startling volume, echoing off the sandstone faces of the temples. The soundscape of Koh Ker is high-pitched and unrelenting, defined by the mechanical buzz of the cicadidae, which intensifies as the midday temperature peaks. Occasionally, this drone is broken by the harsh, laughter-like call of the white-crested laughing thrush, a bird that moves in frantic, social groups through the scrub. This is also a critical habitat for the giant ibis, Cambodia's national bird. This elusive, prehistoric-looking creature with its long, curved beak and gray plumage stalks the seasonal ponds, or trapiings that dot the landscape. Its call is a haunting, low-frequency honk that seems to emanate from the earth itself. On the stone surfaces of the Prang, the ecology is more micro-scale. The sun-scorched sandstone is home to the oriental garden lizard, which changes its hue from dusty brown to a vibrant territorial red as it scuttles across the scorching masonry. The heat radiating from the stone is intense, smelling of parched minerals and the faint, dry dust of the northern plains. There is little moisture here. The flora consists of resilient epiphytes and hardy ferns that shrivel during the day only to drink the meager evening dew. It is an ecology of survival, perfectly mirrored by the stark, monumental architecture it inhabits. The history of Koh Ker is the history of a radical interruption. For a brief, explosive window between 928 and 944 AD, this remote plateau replaced Angkor as the capital of the Khmer Empire. This shift was driven by King Jayavarman IV, a figure often cast as a usurper or a visionary who broke away from the traditional power centers to establish his own celestial city. The deep time here feels different. It is not the gradual accretion of centuries seen at Angkor, but a sudden, massive expenditure of energy and stone. The indigenous history of the region is tied to the Khoi people, ancient iron smelters who likely provided the tools and the labor that carved this city out of the scrub. Their knowledge of the land's mineral wealth was the hidden engine of Koh Ker's construction. The atmosphere at the site is one of heavy, magnificent loneliness. When the capital was moved back to Angkor after only 16 years, Koh Ker was largely abandoned to the forest. The air in the inner sanctuaries of Prasat Chen is cool and smells of damp earth and centuries of leaf mold, a stark contrast to the oven-like heat of the open courtyards. This is a place where history didn't fade, it simply stopped. The architecture of Koh Ker is a radical departure from the standard Khmer canon. It is characterized by a megalithic ambition, a shift from small, intricately carved blocks to massive multi-ton slabs of sandstone that give the city a sense of raw, imposing power. The Prang, the seven-tiered pyramid of Prasat Tam, is the pinnacle of this style. Each tier is perfectly uniform, creating a staircase to the heavens that lacks the ornate flourishes of Angkor Wat, favoring instead a clean, linear austerity. The joints between the massive stones are so precise they remain tight even after a millennium of forest encroachment, smelling of cold mineral and the dry metallic scent of the surrounding laterite. Culturally, Koh Ker was a laboratory for artistic innovation. The Koh Ker style is famous for its dynamic, larger-than-life statuary. Unlike the static, meditative poses of earlier periods, the sculptures here, like the wrestling Valen and Sugriva, captured movement and muscular tension. This cultural shift suggests a society that was looking forward, breaking away from the ancestral shadows of Phnom Kulen. Today, the local culture is a quiet, rural one, where the small villages surrounding the site maintain a deep respect for the Nikta of the ruins. The air in the village markets smells of roasted corn and the sharp, fermented tang of palm wine, a sensory anchor to the modern lives lived in the shadow of the usurper's towers. Two locations offer a glimpse into the specific cultural rituals of this era. The first is Prasat Krachap, where the inscriptions are among the longest and most detailed in the Khmer world, providing a rare written record of the legal and spiritual life of the 10th century. The second is the Linga Shrines, a series of small pavilions housing massive stone lingas that are nearly 2 meters tall. The scale is intentionally overwhelming, designed to make the worshipper feel small in the presence of the divine. The sound here is the low, hollow whistle of the wind moving through the doorways, a sound that carries the weight of a city that was built to be eternal but lasted only a moment. The legacy of Koh Ker is one of mystery and rediscovered significance. For centuries, it was the forbidden city, lost to the thickest reaches of the northern scrub and, more recently, to the dangers of landmines left by decades of conflict. The transition we are witnessing today is one of rebirth. In 2023, Koh Ker was officially inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A transition that has brought new resources for conservation and a renewed sense of pride for the local communities who have lived alongside these stones for generations. The site serves as a bridge between the early empire and the high classical period. It reminds us that history is not a straight line, but a series of experiments, some of which are abandoned before they reach fruition. As the sun begins to dip behind the 7 tiers of the Prang, casting a long, jagged shadow across the Rahal Barai, the transition is palpable. The heat finally begins to break, and the air takes on a crisp evening stillness. We are leaving the dry sandstone plains of the north and moving toward the edge of the world. Our path leads to the very border of the kingdom, where the earth drops away into a vertical abyss. We are headed to the cliff-top sanctuary that has been a point of contention and a place of prayer for 1,000 years. We are moving toward the clouds. We are heading to Preah Vihear. To arrive at Preah Vihear, one must journey to the absolute northern limit of the Khmer world, where the earth does not merely end, but falls away. This temple sanctuary is perched on the edge of a colossal natural boundary, the Cardamom Mountains. Geologically, this range is a massive cuesta, a ridge with a gentle slope on one side and a sharp vertical drop on the other. As you ascend the northern flank, the transition is visceral. The air becomes thin, crisp, and remarkably dry, carrying the scent of parched pine needles and the cold, metallic tang of exposed iron ore. The foundation of Preah Vihear is a massive uplift of Triassic-Jurassic sandstone, part of the Korat group. Unlike the soft silts of the southern floodplains, the rock here is incredibly dense and weather-resistant. Having withstood the erosive forces of the monsoon for millions of years, the temple is built along an 800-meter north-south axis that rises gradually toward the cliff's edge. Walking the ancient stone pavement, the temperature fluctuates with the wind. One moment, you are wrapped in the radiated heat of the sun-soaked masonry. The next, you are hit by a sudden chilling updraft from the abyss below, smelling of damp earth and distant rain. The landscape's climax is the Pei Ta Di cliff. Here, the sandstone plateau terminates in a 525-meter vertical drop into the Cambodian plains. Looking south from this vantage point, the world appears as a vast emerald sea of forest, often obscured by a rolling carpet of white mist that moves with a slow, heavy grace. The sound of this place is dominated by the high-altitude whistle, the wind rushing through the narrow stone galleries and the empty doorways of the gopuras. Two specific locations define the geological drama. The first is the Lion's Head, a natural rock formation near the summit that has been weathered into a shape that guards the precipice. The second is the Ancient Staircase, a series of over 2,000 steps hand-carved directly into the steep sandstone face of the mountain, a sensory reminder of the sheer physical effort required to bridge the gap between the plains and the heavens. The environment of Preah Vihear is a high-altitude sanctuary where the biology is shaped by the sheer verticality of the Dangrek escarpment. The vegetation here is a resilient mix of evergreen and dried deciduous species, dominated by the Anisoptera costata, a towering tree that can reach 50 meters in height, its crown buffeted by the constant winds of the ridge. The air is surprisingly fragrant. The scent of wild orchids, specifically the dendrobium varieties that cling to the humid sandstone crevices, mixes with the dry, resinous aroma of sun-bleached wood. The soundscape is distinct from the lowland forests. The lower frequency hum of insects is replaced by the sharp metallic clack of the great hornbill as it leaps between the stone lintels and the high branches. These birds, with their massive yellow casques, act as the unofficial guardians of the temple, their heavy wing beats sounding like a slow, rhythmic pulsing in the thin air. In the damp shadows of the temple's inner courtyards, where the stone remains cool throughout the day, you might find the Indo-Chinese green magpie, its vibrant plumage a startling contrast to the gray masonry. On the cliff edges, the ecology is dictated by the updrafts. The white-rumped vulture can often be seen circling the void of the Pei Ta Di cliff, utilizing the thermal currents to glide effortlessly over the kingdom below. The flora on these exposed faces is specialized for survival in thin soil. Hardy lithophytes and silver-leaved ferns tuck themselves into cracks in the sandstone, drinking the mist that rolls up from the plains. The sensory experience is one of intense clarity. The sharp light, the cold wind, and the smell of ancient lichen-covered stone. The history of Preah Vihear is a story of a mountain that became a monument. While Angkor was the center of administration, Preah Vihear was the center of spiritual devotion. Its construction spanned over 300 years, beginning in the 9th century under Yasovarman I and reaching its peak under Suryavarman II. The deep time here is recorded in the varied styles of carving. From the early, austere brickwork to the fluid, high classical sandstone bas-reliefs, to walk the length of the temple is to walk through the evolution of the Khmer soul. The indigenous history of this borderland is tied to the Khai and the mountain dwellers who viewed the Dangrek as a bridge between worlds. Long before the stone was shaped into temples, this ridge was a sacred site. The atmosphere today is one of heavy, silent vigilance. Because of its strategic location, the temple has been a flashpoint for modern territorial disputes. And the scars of this recent history, bullet holes in the ancient sandstone and the presence of silent bunkers, layer a sense of modern tension over the ancient peace. The air in the final, most sacred sanctuary smells of incense and cold rain, a place that feels as though it belongs more to the sky than to the earth. The architecture of Preah Vihear is a masterpiece of linear perspective. While most Khmer temples are planned as concentric squares, this sanctuary is laid out along a majestic 800-meter ascending promenade. The design forces a physical and spiritual climb. As you pass through each successive gopura, entrance pavilion, the ground rises and the architecture becomes more refined. The stones are joined with such precision that they seem to grow out of the natural bedrock of the mountain. The pediments are famous for their carvings of Shiva the Destroyer, dancing on the edge of the world, a fitting motif for a temple perched on a 500-meter drop. Culturally, this is a place of profound solitude and high worship. Unlike the bustling community temples of the plains, Preah Vihear was a destination for elite pilgrims and hermits. Today, The culture of the temple is one of quiet persistence. Local families from the base of the mountain bring offerings of marigolds and lotus buds to the final sanctuary, their chants stolen by the constant wind. The sensory experience is defined by the contrast between the heavy, permanent sandstone and the ephemeral, shifting clouds that often drift through the temple galleries. The air smells of beeswax candles and the ozone of an approaching storm. Two unique locations highlight this cultural landscape. The first is Gopura 3, where the carvings are so deep and intricate they create a play of shadow and light that changes every hour of the day. The second is the sacred reservoir, a rock-cut basin high on the ridge. In the reflection of its still, dark water, you can see the temple towers and the open sky at once, a literal meeting of heaven and earth. The sound here is the low, hollow echo of your own footsteps on the stone, amplified by the thin air and the surrounding silence. The legacy of Preah Vihear is defined by its resilience. It has survived the collapse of an empire, centuries of forest encroachment, and modern geopolitical conflict. Its inscription as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2008 marked a transition from a site of strategic military value back to its original identity as a site of universal cultural value. It stands as a symbol of the enduring power of the Khmer identity, anchored to the very spine of the land. The transition we feel here is one of perspective. Standing on the Pei Ta Di cliff, the petty boundaries of humans seem to dissolve into the vast geological scale of the Dangrek Range. The legacy is the view itself, a reminder that the kingdom was built not just on rice and water, but on a vision of the cosmos. As the sun begins to set, casting long golden fingers across the plains 500 meters below, the stone of the temple glows with a warm orange light, as if the mountain itself is breathing. We are leaving the vertical world of the north. From this high sanctuary, we descend back into the heart of the country, moving away from the sandstone heights and toward the hidden, older roots of the civilization. Our next stop takes us back in time, before the era of the great stone pyramids, to a forest where the temples are made of brick and the carvings are of lions and flying palaces. We are heading to the city in the forest of the lush woods. We are heading to Sambor Prei Kuk. To enter Sambor Prei Kuk, to step back into the deep time of the Khmer Dawn. Located in Kampong Tom Province, about 170 kilometers southeast of Angkor, this site represents the ancient capital of Isanapura. The transition from the high sandstone cliffs of Preah Vihear to this region is one of softening. We have returned to the alluvial heart of Cambodia, but here the earth is older and more stable. The landscape is a flat, gently undulating plain, composed of late tertiary and quaternary sediments, clays and sands that have been seasoned by millennia of tropical cycles. The geology here is defined by the absence of massive stone. Unlike the quarries of the Kulen Mountains, the builders of the 6th and 7th centuries had to rely on the earth beneath their feet. This led to a brick culture. The soil in this region is rich in fine-grained clays, which were fired into the resilient orange-red bricks that form the core of the Chenla Empire's architecture. Walking through the three main clusters, Prasat Sambor, Prasat Tao, and Prasat Ye Poan, the ground feels soft and loamy, muffled by a thick carpet of leaves and moss. The air is heavy and still, smelling of damp clay and the sweet decaying scent of the krasang fruit trees. The landscape is dominated by a subtropical semi-evergreen forest. Two locations illustrate the geological and aesthetic transition. The first is the sandy causeway of Prasat Sambor, where the ancient road is still visible, its surface a mix of compacted sand and pulverized brick. The second is the Western Baray, a shallow, seasonal depression that shows how the early Khmer utilized the natural dips in the topography to manage water long before the massive engineering feats of Angkor. The soundscape is a low-frequency hum, the rustle of the forest canopy 50 meters above, and the occasional sharp crack of a falling branch echoing through the empty brick chambers. The ecology of Sambor Prei Kuk is a masterclass in slow-motion reclamation, because these temples are built primarily of brick and bonded with a mysterious vegetable-based mortar. They offer a more porous surface than sandstone. This has allowed the Ficus religiosa and the Ficus albipila to weave themselves into the very fabric of the structures. Unlike the strangler trees of Angkor that pry stones apart, the trees here seem to melt into the brickwork, their roots flowing over octagonal walls like liquid wax. The air is cool and oxygen-rich, smelling of wet bark and the sharp, citrusy scent of the krasang tree leaves. In the early morning, the forest is alive with the tock-tock-tock of the coppersmith barbate, a sound that mimics the rhythmic tapping of a stonemason. High in the canopy, you might spot the black giant squirrel, one of the largest squirrels in the world, its dark fur nearly invisible against the shaded limbs. History here is not measured in grand monuments, but in the transition from wood to masonry. This was the center of Isanapura, the capital of the Chenla period, 6th to 9th centuries. This is the pre-classical era, where the architectural DNA of the later Khmer Empire was first coded. The deep time is visible in the unique octagonal shapes of the temples, a design that would later vanish in favor of the square plans of Angkor. The indigenous history of the site is tied to the Kui and other Mon Khmer speaking groups who mastered the art of brick firing. To touch these walls is to feel a surface that is much warmer than sandstone. The brick retains the sun's heat differently, giving the ruins a living temperature. The atmosphere is one of profound, scholarly peace. It lacks the tourist frenzy of other sites, allowing the smell of the earth and the sound of the wind through the high leaves to transport you back to a time when this was the most advanced city in Southeast Asia. The architecture of Sambor Prei Kuk represents a missing link in world heritage. It is the transition from the Indian-influenced structures of Funan to a distinctly Khmer aesthetic. The hallmark of this site is the octagonal temple, a geometric choice rarely seen in later periods. These brick sanctuaries were once covered in a fine plaster made of lime, sand, and organic binders, like palm sugar or tree resin, into which intricate patterns were carved. Today, much of that skin has weathered away, exposing the raw orange-red brick skeleton. Culturally, the most significant features are the flying palaces, These are high-relief carvings on the exterior brick walls depicting celestial abodes inhabited by deities and mythical figures. They give the heavy brick a sense of weightlessness, as if the entire city were ready to drift into the clouds. A unique location within this stop is Prasat Tao, where two massive, beautifully rendered stone lions guard the entrance. Their manes are stylized into tight, rhythmic curls, a precursor to the guardian lions of Angkor, yet possessing a more rounded, approachable power. The air around these lions smells of sun-warmed lichen and the dry metallic dust of the forest floor. The legacy of Sambor Prei Kuk is one of foundational intelligence. This site proves that the glory of Angkor was not a sudden explosion of genius, but the result of centuries of refinement in this very forest. Its inscription as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2017 highlighted its role as a cradle of Khmer culture. The transition here is moving from forgotten ruin to a protected landscape, where the local villagers are trained as guides to tell the stories of the Asanapura kings. As we leave the dappled shade of the brick forest, the ground begins to change. We are moving away from the central plains and heading toward the rugged, red earth highlands of the east. The humid, clay-heavy air of Kampong Tom is being replaced by the cool, thin breezes of the mountains. We are traveling toward the land of waterfalls and wild elephants, where the earth is stained the color of rusted iron. To enter Mondulkiri is to experience a total geological pivot. We have left the alluvial plains and the sandstone plateaus of the north for the central highlands. This is a landscape of rolling hills, but that gentle description belies a powerful volcanic past. The bedrock here is dominated by Cenozoic basalt, the result of ancient lava flows that have weathered into some of the most fertile, nutrient-dense soil on the planet. This is the red earth. It is heavy, iron-rich, and stains everything it touches a deep, oxidized crimson. The elevation here jumps to 800 meters, and the landscape transforms into a sea of forests. Unlike the jagged escarpments of Preah Vihear, Mondulkiri is a series of infinite rounded green swells. The air is the primary sensory marker of this transition. It is sharp, cool, and carries a high-altitude clarity. It smells of crushed pine needles, wild lemongrass, and the metallic ozone-heavy scent of the many hidden springs. The geological climax of this stop is Busra Waterfall, the largest and most dramatic in Cambodia. Here, the Pech Triada River collapses over a massive basaltic shelf in two distinct tiers. The first drop is roughly 12 meters, but the second is a thundering 25-meter plunge into a cauldron of black volcanic rock and white foam. The sound is a physical weight, a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. A unique location is the Coffee Plateaus near Sen Monoram, where the transition from wild forest to volcanic farmland is visible. The ground here is so rich, it feels springy underfoot, vibrating with the industry of the highland insects. The ecology of Mondulkiri is a radical departure from the lowland jungles. This is a montane forest ecosystem characterized by cooler temperatures and higher rainfall. The dominant flora includes the Pinus mercusii, which gives the highland air its distinctive, bracing scent. In the valleys, the forest is a dense, multi-layered canopy of evergreen and semi-evergreen trees, draped in thick curtains of lianas and epiphytic ferns. The fauna here is legendary and represents some of the most critical biodiversity in Southeast Asia. This is the realm of the Asian elephant in the deep valleys of the Keo Saima Wildlife Sanctuary. The sound of the forest is punctuated by the low-frequency rumble of elephants communicating through the thick undergrowth, a sound that feels more like a tremor in the earth than a noise. Mondulkiri is also one of the last strongholds of the yellow-cheeked crested gibbon. Their morning calls are a haunting, melodic whoop-whoop that echoes across the valleys, a sensory signal that the highland sun has breached the horizon. Down at the base of the Busra waterfall, the microecology is defined by constant moisture. The black basalt rocks are slick with rare mosses and liverworts, and the air is filled with the frantic movement of dragonflies and damselflies, their iridescent wings catching the light like shards of glass. The smell here is green, the scent of life growing at an accelerated rate, fueled by the volcanic minerals and the endless spray. The history of Mondulkiri is not written in stone temples, but in the living traditions of the Bunong people, the indigenous highlanders who have inhabited these hills for over 2,000 years. To the Bunong, the landscape is a sentient map of spirits. Their history is one of deep time connection to the land, a relationship that predates the rise of the Khmer Empire. The atmosphere here is one of ancient quiet autonomy. The deep time is also reflected in the soil itself. The basaltic flows that created these hills are millions of years old, providing a stable foundation that allowed a unique culture of upland Swidden agriculture to flourish. The transition the region is currently undergoing is one of modern pressure. The legacy of the Bunong's ancestral forests is being challenged by rubber and pepper plantations. Yet, in the village of Pulu, the air still smells of traditional charcoal fires and fermented rice wine, and the sound of the gong, the sacred instrument of the highlands, continues to echo through the hills during the harvest moon. In Mondulkiri, architecture is an extension of the forest floor. The traditional Bunong house, or hyang, is a masterpiece of organic integration. Shaped like a turtle's shell or an inverted basket, these low-slung dwellings feature thatched roofs that slope nearly to the ground. There are no windows. The interior is a cool, smoky sanctuary where the air smells of cured bamboo and the earthy, lingering scent of wood smoke. The lack of vertical walls is a structural adaptation to the high-altitude winds that sweep across the rolling hills. The culture is defined by a profound animism. Every hill, forest grove, and stream has a spirit protector. A key activity here and a major cultural transition is the shift toward community-based ecotourism, particularly with the elephants. Unlike the working elephants of the past, these retired giants now roam free in protected valleys. Walking alongside a Bunong mahout, the soundscape is one of heavy, rhythmic thuds as the elephant moves through the brush and the sharp snap of bamboo being stripped of its leaves. A unique location is the Busra Cultural Center, located near the falls. Here, you can hear the traditional music of the gong and the ken. The music is haunting and polyphonic, mimicking the sounds of the waterfall and the wind. The sensory experience is one of groundedness. You sit on the red earth, feeling the vibration of the gongs, smelling the drying tobacco and mountain coffee, realizing that here, culture is not a monument to the past, but a living breath of the present. The legacy of Mondulkiri is its wildness. It represents the green heart of Cambodia, a place that remained largely impenetrable until the late 20th century. The transition we are witnessing now is the struggle between development and conservation. As the red earth is paved over with new roads, the isolation that protected the Bunong way of life is dissolving. However, the legacy of resilience remains. The community's fight to protect their ancestral spirit forests is a modern continuation of their ancient history. Standing at the top of Bozrah, looking out over the endless green swells of the Sea of Forests, you feel a sense of scale that is different from the stone grandeur of Angkor. This is a legacy of biology and belief. The mist rising from the trees is the breath of the highlands, a reminder that the kingdom's strength has always come from the diversity of its landscapes. As we descend from the cool, red earth highlands, we head west toward the sunset. We are leaving the mountains for the greatest artery of Southeast Asia. We move from the Sea of Forests to the Mother of Waters. Our final stop is a journey along the River of Myths, where the water turns to silk and the shadows of rare creatures dance beneath the surface. We are heading to the great transition between the rapids and the plains. We are heading to the Mekong River. To reach the final destination of our journey, we descend from the Mondulkiri Highlands to the banks of the Mekong, the Mother of Waters. This specific stretch, from Kredi up to Stung Treng and the border of Laos, is the most geologically complex and ecologically vital section of the river in Cambodia. As you approach the water, the red basaltic dust of the hills gives way to the fine, silvery gray sands of the riverbank. The air becomes heavy and humid once more, but it is charged with the scent of moving water, a fresh, mineral-rich aroma that feels like the breath of the continent. Geologically, this region is defined by the Mekong Fault and the presence of hard, Precambrian metamorphic basement rock. This ancient rock creates the great rapids of Sambor and Preah. Unlike the smooth, silt-heavy flow of the Mekong in the south, the river here is a chaotic, braided maze of channels. During the dry season, the water level drops, revealing a sunken forest, a geological anomaly where the riverbed is carved into deep, sapphire-blue pools separated by jagged quartz and sandstone outcrops. The landscape is dominated by the Ramsar wetlands. Two specific locations highlight this watery geography. The first is Campi, a series of deep water pools that serve as a thermal refuge for aquatic life. The second is the Sophiakmit waterfalls, also known as the Elbak Kaon, where the entire volume of the Mekong crashes over a series of jagged limestone and basalt ledges. The sound here is a deafening, continuous roar, a geological white noise that drowns out everything else. The spray creates permanent rainbows in the air, smelling of pulverized stone and the sweet, wet scent of the Mekong willow trees that cling to the rocks. The ecology of the Cradie to Stung Treng stretch is one of the most biodiverse freshwater habitats on Earth. It is a riverine forest where the trees have evolved to live half the year submerged in rushing water. The most iconic species of this landscape is the Irrawaddy dolphin. In the deep, quiet pools of Campi, you can hear the sharp, rhythmic chuff of their blowholes as they surface for air. Their presence is a sensory marker of a healthy, living river. The water here smells clean and vibrant, unlike the silty stagnation of downstream canals. The flora is dominated by the Tuk Riang and the Mekong willow, whose gnarled, resilient roots create a subterranean playground for fish during the high water season. This is the heart of the Great Migration. Below the surface, the Mekong giant catfish, one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, navigates these rocky channels. Above the water, the soundscape is a cacophony of river birds, the piercing cry of the river lapwing and the low, guttural croak of the lesser adjutant stork. The history of the Mekong is the history of the great backflow that we witnessed at the Tonlé Sap, but here we see the source of that power. This river has been the primary trade artery of the Khmer for millennia. The deep time is etched into the riverbanks, literally. Near Stung Treng, the receding waters of the dry season reveal ancient rock carvings and Neolithic tool-shaping grooves in the metamorphic bedrock. The indigenous history of this stretch belongs to the Kui and Stieng peoples, who have navigated these rapids for generations. Their history is recorded in the oral traditions of the river spirits, the Nikta who live in the deepest whirlpools. The atmosphere is one of immense flowing power. To sit on the banks at sunset is to realize that the river doesn't just pass through the land, it creates the land. The air smells of drying nets and the charcoal fires of the river nomads, a scent that hasn't changed in 1,000 years. Architecture on this stretch of the Mekong is defined by buoyancy and height. Because the river's volume fluctuates by as much as 12 meters between seasons, the houses in Cradie and Stung Treng are built on towering, spindly stilts, or, in some cases, are designed to float entirely. The architecture of the river is functional and airy, using bamboo and lightweight timber to allow for maximum ventilation. The air inside these homes smells of sun-dried fish and the sweet fermented aroma of prahok being prepared on the decks. Culturally, the river is the center of the universe. The most significant event is the Water Festival, Bon Om Tuk, which celebrates the end of the rainy season. Here, the culture is one of rhythmic movement, the synchronized paddling of longboats that look like slender dragons. A unique location is Koh Trong, a massive sandbar island in the middle of the river opposite Cradie. Life here is slow and disconnected from the mainland. The islanders grow the famous pomelo fruit, which is nourished by the rich river silt. The scent of pomelo blossoms in the evening is intoxicating, mixing with the cool, damp breeze coming off the water. As the sun begins its final descent over the Mekong, we find ourselves at the culmination of an epic arc, a journey that has traced the very veins of this land. We have traveled from the salt-sprayed limestone of the south to the sanctified sandstone peaks of the north, through the brick and root silence of the ancient forests, and across the iron-rich, rolling highlands of the east. Now, here on the silver sands of the river, the legacy of the Mother of Waters reveals itself as the ultimate connector. It is the artery that binds the mountain to the plain, carrying the minerals of the highlands to feed the rice fields of the south. But this legacy is currently suspended in a moment of profound transition. The Mekong is no longer just a wild, untamable force of nature. It is becoming a managed landscape where the ancient pulse of the great backflow faces the modern pressure of a changing world. Standing on a wooden boat, drifting toward the horizon, the water turns to liquid silk, reflecting a sky that has seen empires rise and fall. You feel the weight of this liquid history against the hull, a gentle, rhythmic lapping that reminds us that while the stone of Angkor may be the kingdom's heart, this river is its lifeblood. This journey has shown that growth is not just about reaching a destination, but about the fluid, beautiful adaptation to the terrain we move through. The air is cool, the water is deep, and the story of the land continues to flow. As the sun begins its final descent over the Mekong, we find ourselves at the culmination of an epic arc, a journey that has traced the very veins of this land. We have traveled from the salt-sprayed limestone of the south to the sanctified sandstone peaks of the north, through the brick and root silence of the ancient forests, and across the iron-rich rolling highlands of the east. Now, here on the silver sands of the river, the legacy of the Mother of Waters reveals itself as the ultimate connector. It is the artery that binds the mountain to the plain, carrying the minerals of the highlands to feed the rice fields of the south. Standing on a wooden boat drifting toward the horizon, the water turns to liquid silk, reflecting a sky that has seen empires rise and fall. You feel the weight of this liquid history against the hull. A gentle, rhythmic lapping that reminds us that while the stone of Angkor may be the kingdom's heart, this river is its lifeblood. As our trail comes to an end, we can look back at Cambodia not as a single destination, but as a living tapestry of landscapes and stories. We traveled from deep volcanic highlands to roaring waterfalls, from rugged coastlines to the quiet glow of ancient temple mornings. Each stop showed us something different, not just about the land, but about the people who have called it home, shaped it, protected it, and been shaped by it in return. Cambodia is a country defined by contrast, but bound together by its sense of wonder. It is a place where resilience isn't only about strength, but about the quiet discipline that turns water from a threat into a framework for living. If there's a takeaway worth keeping, it's this. This land isn't one landscape. It's a chain of different worlds linked by the same old backbone of ridges, rivers, and the quiet persistence of life. Thank you for joining us on Era Trails for the Wonders of Cambodia. If you enjoyed this journey and want more documentaries that slow down and actually look at the world, please take a second to like the video and subscribe. On your screen right now, you'll see curated recommendations from our Wonders of series. Feel free to jump into one now or save them for the next time you need a good road in your head. Until next time, stay curious, take care of the places that take care of you, and we'll see you on the next trail.